Just came home from jail, 28 years he did,
Oh, that's good.
for murder.
Okay.
Are we on air?
Are we on air? All right. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Vocab Slayer, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries of crime while sharpening your English skills. I'm your host today, Elizabeth, and these are my co-hosts.
Jacob.
Sabrina.
Say it there.
Sabrina.
Jacob.
Okay. All right. So, of course, today we're once again going to delve into the world of true crime. But before we embark on our journey, let's talk about how you can make the most out of the time you're taking out of your day to listen to our podcast. As an ESL listener, which is probably what you are, or learner, ESL learner. So first, I wanted to talk about a little bit about translanguaging. But first, what is translanguaging? So translanguaging is a powerful tool for language learners to have. It allows us to comprehend or understand complex and difficult content of any sort by taking knowledge from our own linguistic repertoire. So just the knowledge you have from your native language, your L1. So L1 is your native language. You have that word bank in your head, and when you're learning another language, you still have that word bank in your head. So you can always take knowledge from there to help you learning another language.
Yeah, like you've got yours, I've got mine.
Everyone has their own.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. How great is that? So, for example, you might be reading, writing, or listening to materials in your native language and then discuss them later in English. So you have that knowledge from the podcast you listen to about Luca Magnotta. You listen to it in French, but then you can come to your friends and talk to them about it in English. Yeah, Luca Magnotta, he was like crazy, killed cats in Quebec, okay, in Montreal. So you can talk about it in English with your friends, even if you listen to it in French. So you have that knowledge still. So, for example, if you're listening to a true crime podcast, like right now, in your native language, which could be probable because you're listening to our podcast right now, so you must love true crime. Well, just you don't hesitate to bring that knowledge into your English discussions, and also while listening to other podcasts in English. So it's all about making connections and understanding concepts, regardless of the language they're presented in. So, for example, you could be listening to our True Crime Murder podcast, and if at any point the information becomes overwhelming and you need a little break from English because the words just aren't getting registered anymore, and don't worry, we've all been there. Well, there's this thing you can do called postponing. So you can postpone your listening of whatever the podcast you're listening to, the podcast you're listening to right now. And postponing means that you're gonna stop and switch to your L1 whenever you feel stuck learning or using another language. So for this could happen while writing an essay in English where you stop writing and continue writing it in your L1 and then come back to it and translate it. So for example, with listening to this podcast, you could pause the video and then go listen to another podcast, maybe about the same murder, maybe even a different murder, but in your native language. And then you could come back and just have more understanding of like what it is. For example, if you see this is about the Joel and Lisa Guy murder, you can go listen to another podcast in your native language that talks about the same murder. And whenever you're going to come back to this podcast, you're going to understand it better. So you're going to understand the words in English I'm saying better because you know what's happening already. So it's going to be easier to register. So perfect. Now, I wanted to tackle the technical language you might encounter in true crime podcasts in general. So understanding terms like RBS or reddish-brown staining is crucial for putting together the evidence in a case. That's just one example. So for example, RBS, reddish-brown staining, refers to the substances that are suspected to be blood before confirmation of forensic testing. I will explain what forensic testing is. Forensic testing is the gathering of data, so collecting the collecting of data for analysis and for use in legal proceedings. So depending, so for example, RBS is one of the technical terms that I've learned from listening to true crime podcasts. So for example, on a scene, if police are seeing splatters of reddish brown staining, they're not going to say, oh, there's blood there, because it hasn't been confirmed by the forensics science team yet. So they can't say for sure. It could be ketchup, it could be rust, sometimes can do kind of the same color, it could be something else. So just to make sure, when they're like going through a house after a murder, they're going to say there's a lot of reddish brown staining there, there's a lot of reddish brown staining there, and they're going to send it to the forensics team. And I chose this murder today, this case, because that's actually where I learned the term reddish brown staining. So by listening to podcasts, even I learned a word I didn't know about before, because it's a technical word. It's technical language. It's not something you're gonna just hear in your everyday life. Like if you're not on crime scenes, you're not gonna hear reddish brown staining.
Yeah.
Did you guys know what reddish brown staining meant? No.
I totally did.
Totally did.
But yeah, so that's the great thing about, if you're interested in something and you're listening to podcasts about it, well, you might be learning technical language, and you can always look it up. In my part, I heard it a lot while listening to podcasts and listening to that one in particular. And then I looked at the comments and everything, and I learned that reddish brown staining meant that, because I didn't know what it meant. Well, I was like, that's blood. Why do they keep saying reddish brown staining, right? But yeah. Okay, so that's just one term. That's just one thing, but I gathered like some of the most used technical language words that you might hear in true crime podcasts. Just some of them. I took like not that many. So first, you can go. We have, we have trace evidence. All right. So trace evidence is just it's tiny materials like hair or fibers that are left at a crime scene. All right. So anything at a crime scene, if you've ever seen pictures at a crime scene or anything like that, you might see a bunch of like sticky notes or a bunch of stuff like, pointing to evidence. So everything you find on a crime scene, little things, can be blood, can be hairs, can be clothes, can be anything. That's all trace evidence. So that's just how they call it. They don't just call it evidence, they call it trace evidence. Next word, alibi. So an alibi is pretty important, and I feel like you might hear it in every true crime podcast. But it's basically just the evidence proving that someone was elsewhere when a crime occurred. So for example, if somebody just got killed at my house and the police is like, you killed that person, where were you at 11:59 on Friday 12th? Well, this is my alibi right now. I'm filming a podcast, so that couldn't have been me, because I have my alibi. I was filming a podcast. It's on film. You have the time and everything.
So were we.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're not responsible.
We all have an alibi right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's an alibi. So you will hear a lot of that when talking about murders and stuff, especially when they're trying to find one suspect. They're going to be asking a lot of people, seeing if they all have alibis and stuff. So yeah, that's what an alibi is. Next one. Next one, we have autopsy. So an autopsy will always happen whenever there's a murder. So that is when you're examining. So it's an examination of a body of a victim to determine the cause of death. So autopsies are done also even if there's no murder, but like when there's a murder, they will for sure do an autopsy. Even if the person got shot in the head, they're not just going to be like, look at it and say, that person got shot in the head, that's the cause of death. Because you never know. After doing an autopsy, they might find that there was poison and he died from poison before being shot. So you can't just assume the cause of death. You have to do the autopsy to be sure of what the cause of death is.
Can I make a note?
Yes.
I don't know if you do talk about that, but I see on the poster you put that when they do autopsies and they're not sure of the identity, even in the medical field, when they're not sure of a person, often it happens when they don't have the face or any belongings of the person. They're gonna call, if it's a woman, they're gonna call her Jane Doe, or if it's like a male in in those cases, they're gonna call him John Doe.
John Doe, I
Not
think,
mistaken.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I forgot about the poster. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say this. I totally forgot to say this, but I was gonna just mention, like, if you've ever seen that movie, well, the whole point is they're conducting an autopsy. So that's what an autopsy is. Just to make a reference, just so it's something you can think about whenever you think of that word. Now next we have the word cold case. So cold case is just an unsolved crime investigation. I hate listening to true crime and it's a cold case because it's a mystery. You don't know who the culprit is. At the end of the day, the culprit being the person who did the crime. And so I don't like cold cases. I don't think we have any cold cases.
we don't have any cold
We're
cases.
not doing this to you.
Our murderers are locked down.
Yeah.
They cannot escape.
Yeah. So there's no cold cases here, but a cold case is when there's still a mystery, they're not sure. Also, a cold case doesn't necessarily mean that there's no probable suspect. Like sometimes you will like have a lot of suspects. If you're listening to a podcast, you could hear about a bunch of suspects with different alibis and you might really think that guy did it for sure. But sometimes they just don't go to jail for it. So it could be a cold case even if there's a very obvious culprit.
But wasn't to give an example, John Benet Ramsey, the little girl that did pageants, was a cold case for like what?
It's still
30
a cold case,
years?
technically.
I think they figured it out.
No one got arrested, so it's still a cold case.
Oh.
They think it might be the brother, they think it might be the father,
Cold
they think the
cases-
parents covered it up, but that's another story.
Those
But
cold cases could be like when they like are almost sure it's that person, but they don't have enough proof.
they just don't have proof to put
Like,
them in jail, to put them in.
They don't have enough proof. Like,
Yeah, so they could be sure, like they know it's that person who did it, but it's still a cold case if that person didn't go to, didn't get consequences for it. If it didn't go to trial and they got convicted for it, it's technically a cold case because no one got pointed at for the murder. And next, we have DNA evidence. So DNA evidence, well, just think of this. You probably know what this is. So that's DNA. So that's DNA. And so we were talking about trace evidence. So DNA evidence can be part of the trace evidence, but it's everything that is to do with our DNA. So for example, trace evidence, you had like blood, could be hairs. So that's also DNA evidence. But like trace evidence can also be like clothes and stuff. Clothes could have DNA on them, but it's not innate. But you know, DNA evidence is really like hairs, bone, tooth, blood, saliva, semen, anything. So it's all things that in a case, they will collect all of the DNA evidence they can to try and pinpoint the culprit, the person who did the crime. And finally, the last word I had that I thought was good to know when you're listening to podcasts is homicide. Homicide, I think it's like a word you just have to learn because we have the word murder, we have the word kill, we have everything. Homicide is the same thing. It's killing of a person by another. So same thing. So homicide is a murder. A homicide is a kill was made. So it just means the same thing. So homicide, if you hear us saying that, it's a murder. All right, so you can leave it there. Leave it there. Now, so all of those words is just scratching the surface. So, it's very important to familiarize yourself with these terms, not only, for your understanding of the cases, but also just to enrich your English vocabulary. So as we dive into the questions ahead, keep these technical terms in mind. All right, so let's get on to the murder case. So in November 2016, authorities, I'll be talking to you guys now, authorities received a disturbing call from Lisa Guy's concerned coworkers. They hadn't heard from Lisa Guy and her husband, Joel Guy Sr., even after multiple calls. That day, so on November 2000, I didn't find the date, but in November 2016, on the day the police received the call, it was supposed to be Lisa Guy's last day at work before retiring.
Okay, I was gonna say those are some good coworkers because I would not notice if one of my coworkers would go missing.
But it was her last day,
Okay, that
so
makes
she's
sense.
been there for a long time, and She's a very nice, like they had a lot of friends, her and her husband. People know them, people care about them.
Okay.
You know, usually maybe murderers will go for victims. If they know the victim, they'll go for victims who have no one. But they had a lot of entourage. So, yeah. So the coworkers called because she didn't come to work. She didn't call in to say she wasn't coming to work. And that just wasn't like her. So they called and asked for a welfare check. So if you're calling the police, asking for a welfare check is when you're telling the police to go at their residence, where they live, to just check on them, like not go see if they're there, go see if they're okay, because it's not normal. Like it's not. She would have called. She would have done something. She would answer her phone. Nothing of that's weird. Can you please go check on them? So that's what a welfare check is. So they were asking for a welfare check to be made by the police. And that's exactly what the police did. So they got to the residence where they live. And okay, so the police got to the residence. And as investigators entered the residence, they were greeted by a scene straight from a nightmare.
Nightmare.
Blood-soaked walls.
Oh.
Floors stained with reddish-brown staining. And a disgusting, gross chemical scent that pierced through the hot air.
Oh.
Okay.
I can
In
feel
fact,
it.
yeah,
I can feel it.
I'm trying to make you see the scene. In fact, when the officers first arrived inside the home, they discovered that the thermostat was set at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 32 degrees Celsius inside the house.
That's really hot.
Yes, very hot. Okay. And there was a stench too. And it's just if there's a bad odor and it's hot, it's even worse.
Yes.
So yeah. Yeah. So the officers proceeded to go up the stairs where they heard a dog barking. So there was a dog barking in the house. So they went to that first. And they found the dog that was locked in the bedroom. So they kind of looked around in the bedroom. They found something there, but we're going to go back to it. But then looking down the hallway, they could see like reddish brown staining on the walls. And they discovered Joel Sr.'s dismembered hands.
Like
That's another word. Next. I forgot about that one. Dismembered. Dismembered means to cut, tear, or pull the arms and legs off of a body of a dead person or animal. So dismembered hands. So they found
his hand.
Joel Sr.'s hands. Yeah.
Oh,
And I believe that was in the bedroom. I think.
hate those cases.
Yeah.
Why they gotta do that?
Why they gotta do that?
It's
Like-
already disgusting enough.
So they found them on the floor with large spots of reddish brown staining all over the rug. It was like a house where there's rug everywhere. So it's stained. Like you can't really clean that very fast. Okay, it's stained everywhere. It's everywhere. You can go see online the walkthrough to the house. Like they're doing the whole walkthrough. It's reddish brown staining everywhere. And so horrified at what they were seeing, the officers, they continued the search, and they went into the bathroom that was connected to that bedroom where they found the hands. And there they found both Joel and Lisa's dismembered corpses sitting inside 2 plastic tubs, like Rubbermaid plastic tubs, in a homemade acid solution. So they were sitting there. So that's the stench.
I'm just gonna say it. That's some goods too.
That's not good. Oh wait.
Oh.
So, yeah. So in a homemade acid solution. So whoever did that was trying to,
Like
make it
dissolve-
dissolve in acid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the home was actually so hazardous, so dangerous to be in with the chemical scents and the temperature too, that the investigators later had to wear hazmat suits, like the full suits where everything's closed, to continue with the investigation, because it was so hazardous, so dangerous to be in the house with all those chemicals and scents. But now the worst of it would be discovered in the kitchen. Ooh, you called it.
I don't want
In the kitchen.
I don't want to know.
There, police found a stock pot boiling on the stove. Investigators would later discover the pot to contain the decapitated head of Lisa Guy. Boiling, cooking there. A good stew, like you said.
Good soup.
Good soup.
I think I heard of this story.
You think you heard of it?
The pot, when you said the pot,
The
like,
pot?
I was like, I heard of a story. Like, I don't know if every like killer that dismembers their victims.
No, it's not.
boil
It's rare.
them,
No,
but
it's
like
rare.
I think I heard a story.
Yeah,
like
I think
that.
you can go to the next
Okay,
slide.
but I'm just saying.
Next slide.
Is there? I'm gonna let.
Is that the real pot?
That's the real pot. That's from the police camera from when they were
Yeah.
going
My
around the house.
concern is
Yes.
the murder was there like must have been there like not long ago because
Like I said, I was talking about their entourage. Like they had a very tight knit entourage.
So they found them quick.
You couldn't go 2 days without hearing from them, you know? So it was quick. Like
Yeah, okay.
but you'll see, I'll explain a little bit more.
okay, I'm gonna let
Yeah.
you talk.
Yeah.
I was just talking about the murder now. Like it's Okay. So and going back to something else they discovered in the bedroom, there was a backpack in the bedroom. And in that backpack, there was a notebook detailing the whole plan, detailing everything. And I'll read some of it to you. So you can go to the next one. So this was part of the notebook. You maybe can't see from there, but it's like, flush, down the toilet. You can't really tell because it's bad handwriting and a lot of mistakes. So study your English, guys.
Flush sodium hydroxide.
Yeah. Cut off his arm and plant his flesh under her fingernails, plant his flesh. So like trying to. So basically, whoever wrote this, that's a full confession because that's exactly what happened.
Mhm.
It's a detailed plan of what's gonna happen and
Like,
what's next
step
and what's
by
next, step by step. And there was also, I don't have a picture, but there was also a list of things to buy. I'll read some of it to you because I don't want to detail the body. I don't want to detail the autopsy too much, but I'll just read some of the list that was down in the notebook, and you can get the idea of what happened to them. Get killing knives, quiet, multiple. Get carving knives to make small pieces. Other point, get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat. Get bleach. I'll go a bit more down. Get rid of bodies inside house. Their DNA and my DNA are already here. So just from that, you can kind of deduct that whoever murdered them their DNA would already be in the house, as it would be normal for their DNA to be in the house.
It's the dog.
Big mystery. It might be the dog.
It's the dog.
But yeah, big mystery is pretty easy. Like, but and there was another thing bad. Oh, another thing that's a confession, basically, a little bit further down. He's not alive to claim her half of the insurance money. Equals all mine, $500,000.
Well,
Jesus Christ.
I don't know who did it, but did he leave this on purpose, or it wasn't? I don't think he wanted
Another
the
thing
police to
about
find it.
the scene that I don't think I mentioned anywhere, but I remember it. The scene, it was stuff everywhere, wallets on the table, it was rushed, things were not as if just came back. There was bags of supplies, there was bags of bleach, bags of everything in front of the door, the wallet on the thing, everything was thrown. It was a very chaotic scene of rushed. So it seems this, I would say it's not confirmed, but I would say that this wasn't left on purpose. It was rushed. You need to get out
he
right now.
ran because
Yeah.
maybe he heard the police coming.
See, this is why I felt because of the pot boiling, it felt weird to me. The
It
killer
can't be
had-
boiling for 3 days.
The killer had to have been there
Not
an
too
hour
long.
prior.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the thing about the insurance money. Confession there. If you can find who wrote this, that's a full-on confession.
Yeah, all the proof.
Okay. So next, the investigation soon pointed to the couple's own son, Joel Guy Sr. But Joel Guy Jr. But what drove him to commit such an heinous act on his own flesh and blood, right? So we're gonna go back a little bit of backstory. So Joel Guy Jr., who was 28 at the time, in 2016. When was this? 2016, yeah, okay. So he was, in 2016, Joel Guy Jr. was 28, and him and his sisters were gathered with their parents at Joel and Lisa Guy's home on Thanksgiving in 2016. So right after Thanksgiving dinner, I guess, because it's all like, from deduction, all of this. So right after Thanksgiving dinner, the guys said goodbye to their daughters who lived in Tennessee, further away. And they had planned to say goodbye to their son, Joel, on that Friday before he headed home to Baton Rouge. So Joel Guy Jr. had lived in Baton Rouge for a decade, and he was completely reliant on his parents' financial support at 28 years old. At 28 years of age, okay, completely reliant on his parents' money, never had a job, completely reliant financially on his parents. He had never had a job. He was 28.
He was leaving. He wasn't living with living.
He was living he was getting funded to live.
Okay, so he wasn't living with his parents.
No, he was living somewhere else.
They were paying for.
Yeah, they were paying for him to have. Yeah, but here's another part of a motive. On that Thanksgiving, the guys actually mentioned to their daughters that they had planned to cut off Joel Jr. financially after the Thanksgiving get-together. Probably because Lisa was getting retired, so they need to keep some money for themselves, right?
They wouldn't have enough money to take care of
exactly.
it
So she was retiring, so it's the time to, but yeah. So it's not clear if Joel and Lisa ever got the opportunity to tell their son that they were no longer going to support him financially. But next thing you know, it's the morning when Lisa's coworkers called the police for a welfare check. So yeah, the truth, as it often does, emerged from the shadows, and Joel Guy Jr. had planned the murders, hoping to inherit his parents' money and his parents' wealth, and in a calculated frenzy, it was forensic. He had butchered them, dismembered their bodies, and and tried to cover his tracks, but didn't have a lot of time to do so. Didn't have enough time to clean up all the trace evidence. All right, but yeah, justice would not be denied, and Joel Guy Jr. was arrested and charged in 2020. So 4 years later, because the justice system. And he was charged with the slayings of his parents, and the trial would ultimately deliver a verdict of guilty, which is fitting for the monster he is and the murder he did. So that's pretty much it for the story. Do you have some questions?
That's crazy. Because you just needed a little job, you did all that. That's why some people, I'm like, oh, why did you mind?
You were 28. How long did you have to save up?
I'm like, why did your mind go to this first? Why did you think of maybe I should find out work?
If you want, you can switch.
I mean, I have.
But he said no. I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see.
That's Joel Guy Jr.
He looks like he doesn't know.
That's when he got arrested. I could never find anything about why he's like this. I have no idea why he's like this. Oh, and I was gonna mention too, when he got arrested, even more evidence that was left, DNA evidence. He had a bunch of scratches on his hands from his parents fighting back. So yeah, it was very obvious that it was him, and it was very. He had a plan, he had a full plan, but he didn't think that his parents had friends. I have no idea, but he didn't have time. If I remember correctly, he heard the police coming and fled super fast. So yeah, because he had a plan to clean up everything and stuff. He had a bunch of bleach, but yeah.
To me, you'd think that a guy who can plan that much and know that much about chemicals and stuff, how to dismember a body, could find a job. I mean, you
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
if you want to, you could.
Yeah, but no, it's
He has the
easier to get the parents' inheritance.
He has the face of someone that works at Home Depot.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Like, could have just go work at Home Depot.
Yeah. What can I say?
Even
What
if they
can
have
I
given
say?
all the money. So
What can I say? Anyways, so dear listeners, we hope you keep listening and see you.
See
Until next time. Bye.